this computer. We are now recording. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the 2024 Rural Non-Congregate Debrief meeting. And my name is Dominique. And again, we have Captain Foresty from the department here helping facilitate this meeting. Maybe a familiar photo here for some of you attendees. I hope you all had a wonderful and successful summer and enjoyed a great program operations in this hot, smoky summer that we just went through. The purpose of this debrief meeting today is to get everyone together, sponsors that operated rural non-congregate and those that did not operate rural non-congregate, to glean information from one another on how their operations went this summer. This is the first summer that Idaho has participated in rural non-congregate feeding. And so we encourage sponsors that didn't operate the program to attend in order to learn some best practices and lessons learned, because some of the lessons were very hard and fast as sponsors went through the program operations. And we just want to give you some ideas on how you can implement rural non-congregate feeding if you're eligible in your communities moving forward to next summer. We're also planning on utilizing the information that we gather from this meeting today to improve our, I'll say rural non-congregate one more time, but now I'm going to say RNC. I have a difficulty saying that so many times, but we want to make sure we have the tools, more tools set up for sponsors next summer. So we'll take what we learned today. And we also had a debrief meeting yesterday. So we will post those to my Idaho CMP platform once we get them ADA compliant. So you can see both if you're not able to join both meetings. So you can watch both meetings and see what information was shared and what some of the sponsors provided during the meeting. Sorry, more coffee. Want you to know this is not a heavy PowerPoint meeting. This is a space to exchange ideas, ask questions, and share experiences from this summer. For the sponsors that did not operate RNC this summer, it's a time and place to gather information from sponsors that did operate. So it's really an open platform where if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, raise your hand or just unmute, because we really want to just talk about what happened this summer and things that if we have concerns about operating the program, what went well. So that's the point of this. It's not 70 slides, just so you know. And here is the agenda. Today's agenda is, we're going to do a brief overview of rural non-congregate meal service options, the number of sponsors and sites that participated this summer, and we'll discuss some ideal or meal service options for rural non-congregate feeding, and which models were most ideal for sponsors as they went through the summer operations. While all of the claims have not been submitted, we have May and June, not all of July or August. We will provide a rough comparison of meals served in 2023 to 2024, so you can see what potential impact this RNC feeding could have on your program. And last but not least, Katie Rogers from Minidoka Schools has volunteered to present on their RNC operations this summer, sharing best practices and lessons learned. So thank you, Katie. Oh, I have Angie still there. Oops. Thank you, Katie, for being here and volunteering to share some of your best practices. Again, make sure you drop questions in the chat box, unmute, or raise your hand so we can answer any questions as they come up. Okay. Check. Oh, thanks, Katie. All right, let's go on to the next. Okay, all of you know, if you're in summer feeding, you understand why we do this and you understand the gap of between the number of children that receive meals during the school year and those that receive meals during the summer. More than 30 million children participate in school breakfast and lunch programs, but only about 1 in 6 kids who eat free and reduced meals at school lunch participate in summer meal programs. That we also know that food insecurity can have lasting impacts on academic achievement as well as mental and physical health. And our state has about 8.6% of children that have experienced food insecurity. One of the barriers to reaching children during the summer is that since the implementation of the summer food program, the requirement of providing congregate meal settings, where children take the meals and have to stay, that's been a barrier and something that sponsors have contended with for years. So the goal across summer nutrition programs is simple. We want to break down those barriers and challenges and connect children with nutritious foods during the summer months to help them grow and thrive. How does rural non-congregate meal service break down these barriers? The Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023. This is the act that was released on December 29th, 2022, that authorized a permanent rural non-congregate meal service option in the summer food service program, a permanent summer electronic benefits transfer program, which is summer EBT, and this rule was issued in December of 2023. A note, most of you know that Idaho is not currently participating in the summer electronic benefits program, but we are participating in rural non-congregate. And through this act, there have been several meal service flexibilities that are open to sponsors that are eligible for the rural non-congregate feeding. And that is the following. For the first time in summer food program history, meal service flexibilities include daily non-congregate meal service, the multi-day meal service, bulk distribution, home delivery, and conditional non-congregate. I'm going to cover examples of the first three because those were the flexibilities that sponsors operated under in Idaho this last summer. We are not going to cover home delivery or conditional non-congregate in detail because we simply did not have any sponsors that operated that. So we have no experience to share with you. We have no best practices, but we will cover a little bit of that just in some slides. And if you want to sign up for rural non-congregate feeding for summer of 2025, they will be covered in more detail during that training. Okay, first option, daily non-congregate meal service. This is a meal service for sites that are operating every day of their operation as non-congregate. For example, you provide meals Monday through Friday and typically operated in a brick and mortar site such as a cafeteria or a park. It also includes mobile meal sites. I think one benefit of the daily non-congregate meal service is if you are a new sponsor. We had sponsors that operated this type. If you're a new sponsor or you're not really comfortable with handling all of the regulatory requirements of operating rural non-congregate meal service, this is a good sort of starting place because, for example, we had sponsors that operated at a park and they served breakfast at 10 a.m. and the kids could take their food and leave. They came back at lunch and they were able to pick up their lunch and take that offsite as well. So that's an example of daily non-congregate meal service. What we saw as the state agency, we traveled around Idaho and conducted technical assistance visits on all sponsors, well, most sponsors that operated multi-day or bulk meal distribution to see how the operations were going. And what we witnessed was these non-congregate meal service sites, while the children could take their food and leave, most of them sat and stayed. They'd sit at the park or sit under a shady tree. So this is a really good starting place for rural non-congregate operations for sponsors that are new to the program. Here's some photos of some meal preparation. Obviously, as Katie will attest to, this type of meal service requires a lot of planning and preparation. Some meal setup site photos from our road trip around the state this summer. The next flexibility is multi-day meal service. So approved sponsors may distribute up to the allowable number of reimbursable meals that can be provided over a 10-day calendar period. Just a note, the state agency has the discretion to limit the number of days a sponsor can provide multi-day meal service, and that's case by case basis. We cannot issue a blanket set number of days, so we have to take that on a case by case basis. An example is Monday. All the meals are prepared and set at a site, and they provide meals for Monday through Friday or Monday through Sunday. So it's really, but each meal is individually portioned. So they have Monday, you have your milk, your sandwich, your fruit, your vegetable, and then they're separated out by each day's portion. So that is an example of multi-day with individual meals being portioned out and served to the participants in the community. And just a reminder, multi-day meal service is not bulk meal service. So I'll go through that in a minute. Multi-day is each individual meal is provided, say, in a bag like this. So here's an example of multi-day. This is from Horseshoe Bend, and you'll notice that there was a reusable tote bag, which was a great idea. We saw a lot of creative ways of serving meals this summer when you're serving more than one day's worth of meals. And what this photo shows is the milk crate had all of the milk and refrigerated items for the family member. And then the box had all the frozen food items. So the sponsor would prepare all of the frozen items, put them in the brown paper bags, and keep those in the freezer until meal service. And then the fabric bag had all the shelf stable items. So they had it all separated. But as you can see, this is a lot of product for one family. So as you go through the summer, we've seen some sponsors shift their operations on how they distribute. But I wanted to point out these fabric tote bags were a great idea on how to not use as much plastic. Plastic bags break, but the totes, and the sponsor did say that in the beginning they had a hard time getting the participants to bring the bags back, but if the participants did not, then they served them their meals all in boxes. So it was a gentle reminder that they needed those bags for distributing the meals.
When you guys put your Murtaugh handout in the chat.
Yes, thank you. So Kat dropped Murtaugh's menu in the chat because a lot of sponsors, one of the requirements is you have to be really detailed on what you're providing. Whether it's bulk or multi-day, you have to have a menu that details what each meal service entails. So for example, breakfast is the muffin with the apple and the milk. And that's something that needs to be documented so the participants can readily see what they are eating, and it includes heating instructions. So everything that you're serving, you need to let the family know what they're receiving and explain heating or storage or freezing, refrigeration information. And some sponsors operated this electronically, some had paper documents. And so Kat dropped Murtaugh's menu in the chat box because this is one of the best examples of the detail that absolutely covers everything that was served, preparation instructions for each item, and what each day's menu should look like. As sponsors, you know your community's best. So whether you think electronic communications, I'm sure Katie will share some of her ideas, but electronic communications work. But if you think that your community is more suited towards paper, that's great. It's your choice and you're the ones who know best on how to communicate with your community members. But bulk distribution really is providing multiple days of meals in bulk. For example, instead of providing 5 half-cup portions of carrots, you would go through the math and determine how many carrots, which would be 2.5 cups of carrots that you need for that 5-day distribution of a half-cup serving size. And you need to document that so the parents know this bag of carrots is what is intended for each of these days and how many servings. So you need to be more detailed on what the serving is, but bulk items really cut down on the use of portion products like Ziploc bags, plastic bags. So it is an option to utilize bulk meal distribution if you are eligible and approved. The maximum number of reimbursable meals is 5 day, that cannot exceed the 5 days or 5 calendar period. So that's something for your calculation efforts, how much you would need in bulk. What we've seen with a lot of sponsors is they are operating in combination. They have multi-day meal service with bulk distribution. For example, 4 different meals with their components separated out, but they serve a gallon of milk with that. So there's some things that can be more easily distributed in the bulk manner. However, you must think about your participants and what their space is like. What is their holding equipment? Do they have enough refrigeration space? Do they have proper heating utensils? Do they have a microwave? Do they have ovens? What to do? So having instructions on what to do with leftover food is also helpful for these parents to make sure food safety is something that you want to take into consideration. And one thing that we did see, which was great, a lot of sponsors utilized shelf-stable milk this summer, and they chilled it before they served it. So it went to the families cold, but that is something that will help reduce the amount of space needed to store these meals that are served either in multi-day or bulk. Okay, bulk distribution, it is a little more detailed on how you're going to operate the program. You have to indicate additional information that included with the meals. As we just mentioned, heating instructions, food safety. Every year, this is the first year, and I know the integrity plan was a little, maybe not painful, but it was very time consuming as sponsors figured out their plan on how they're going to operate these meal service styles, but maintain program integrity. And what we did witness is that the integrity plans that were submitted with application packet renewal, what we saw, this is sort of like your budget. It's your blueprint. This is what we think is going to happen. But then when we were out on site, we saw a lot of things that had changed because of actual application of this process and seeing things that didn't work or things that were better served. And this happened pretty quickly with sponsors. So how your integrity plan changes at the end of summer based on what you experience, that's something that hopefully will get easier in time, but you have to go through the first summer and figure out how you operate before you know what's going to work and what's not. And just one note, if you are serving vended meals, bulk meal distribution is not an option. So that is one of the restrictions. So just to keep in mind, if you vend bulk, you can operate multi-day meals, but not bulk meals. Okay. As you can see in this slide, bulk meal distribution takes up a lot of space, a lot of time, and a lot of effort. This is an example. Katie will share more of Minidoka's preparation. As you can see, they have the menu. This is showing them what's in the box so the people that pick it up know what they're getting. The second photo has gallons of milk. They found out early it was much easier to distribute gallons of milk and do that calculation. And then prepping on the day of delivery took up a lot of space. All the boxes were organized with the menu and all of the items for the parents to pick up. So labor intensive, yes. With the proper planning, it can be organized so it becomes more of an efficient machine, but that does take time. Okay, parent guardian pickup. This one has been sort of a sticking point. The Consolidated Appropriations Act allowed for rural non-congregate meal service in the summer of 2023. However, there was not guidance provided to state agencies to share with sponsors on how to operate rural non-congregate meal service. One of those, so what happened is Idaho didn't opt in. We waited until 2024 when we had some final rules governing how these operations were. But one of the issues has always been parent and guardian pickup. Sponsors in good standing may allow parents and guardians to pick up program meals on behalf of their children. So that's something where the program integrity comes into place. How are sponsors going to document that they have procedures in place that only parents or guardians of children are going to receive these meals? So one of the things that we saw is many sponsors opted to provide parent guardian meal pickup, but did not allow meals to be picked up without children present. Some sponsors allowed parents to pick up without children being present by signing an attestation saying I'm picking up for so-and-so. And in Idaho, we define guardian, and this is in our Idaho rules, is a person who looks after and is legally responsible for someone who is unable to manage their own affairs. So it is not the daycare provider. It is not your neighbor. It is not siblings or or teachers. So that's something that's been somewhat of an issue this summer as sponsors operated this. And I did want to ask if any of you will volunteer. Did you have any obstacles or best practices this summer using parent guardian pickup? So is there anyone on the floor that wants to share what they did and why, and if they had, what the feedback from the community was?
You can also type it in the chat if you're not able to communicate with your audio.
Okay, well, while we're waiting, I did have a sponsor up north and they allowed parent guardian pickup, but the children needed to be present. And there was some pushback from the community. And what their response was, but this is how we are ensuring program integrity. And that, while people aren't super happy with that because I said so mentality, it was because that's how that sponsor chose to operate to ensure they were operating the program according to their integrity plan. And one thing that we did see this summer is the community support for these meals has been huge. Because we know the price of food has not gone down. And when kids are home for summer and parents are working, they come home to an empty refrigerator. So having these meals available for parents to pick up and bring to their children, the feedback from the community of the sponsors that I visited has been overwhelmingly in support of the program. And that's something that is great to help us grow in different areas of the state and keep offering this program. Any takers? Make some more coffee? Okay, we'll move on. Preventing meal duplication, that is one of the trickier aspects of providing RNC meals. Each sponsor has to create a procedure to make sure no duplication of meals are served through the service. It includes congregate and non-congregate sites. They have to ensure parent guardian pickup, that the parents are picking up for their children, and that is part of your operating procedure in your integrity plan. I've seen so many different ways that sponsors have chosen to try and prevent meal duplication. One practice we saw this summer was a sponsor had different colored stamps and different designs on the stamps. So each site or each day they'd have a separate stamp and color. So if participants went to other sites, they'd already been stamped. Majority of sponsors provided an attestation that said, okay, I guarantee, I promise I'm not going to pick up meals from other sites. Some sponsors had it a little easier because they were the only site in town. So the preventing meal duplication in your plan is going to vary by sponsor. It depends on your communities. Are there any sponsors that would like to share how they prevented meal duplication in their areas before we move on?
Dominique, I know I'll share a little bit later, but just to kind of get the conversation started,
Thank you.
we added kind of like what you're saying, an attestation in the Google Form sign up for our bulk boxes. That was our main concern, was these people that are getting bulk boxes turn around and going to the parks. So we had them promise us that they would not do that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But then for our park sites, we tried to time it so that because we had we were going down the road, it was the same people in that neighborhood for our staff, so they would notice people picking up at the same site or at different sites, but then also the time, so you wouldn't be able to drive from Paul to Rupert and get different meals that way. So we managed it as far as like the time of location.
I was gonna
That's
say.
great.
Sorry,
And is that you, Angela?
yes, it is. So, the nice thing about mine was it was only one place that we had the meals going out. And make sure that we didn't have any duplications. We put our times similar to the ones where we had congregated feedings. So that they couldn't go and eat at the congregated feedings and then run to the non-congregated feedings. That way we didn't have any duplications of the food.
That's a great idea. And that's one thing we saw yesterday, is having congregate meal sites and non-congregate meal sites. One sponsor had congregate meal sites only for summer school. And then when summer school shut down, they either turned the sites into non-congregate or they shut those sites down and had distribution points in town. For the kids in summer school, one of their duplication procedures was that if a parent were to pick up a meal, they used Google Docs as well, and they had 5 kids, but one of the kids was in summer school, they had the summer school enrollment list at the sites. So if a parent wanted to pick up 5 meals during summer school, they were only able to pick up 4 because one of the children was receiving the meals at the school during summer school. And then when summer school ended, they just communicated with the sponsor that the summer school is over and they wanted to increase their meal packages from 4 to 5. I think the key here with all of these plans is communication with your community, letting them know what your plans are. A lot of sponsors put out surveys to gauge the interest, but having that communication with the people in your local community so they know what to expect, and they have a way of communicating with you on questions or concerns that they have for these programs.
You have a
Thank you for-
comment in the chat as well.
Okay, well, we did rostering and I feel it was not as easy to manage and still fought the duplicate pickups. Okay. Rostering, I feel was not as easy to manage. So how did those, do you have a microphone, Vanessa, or how was the rostering? What was the difficulty with duplicate pickups when you had rosters? Mute. That's okay, Vanessa. Does anybody have any ideas or did they experience this using rosters and is there a solution that they came up with? Okay, she says it took a lot of time at the sites for signing in and then we searched for duplicates. It was just unwieldy and I hope we can get other ideas. Okay. I do remember that it was every day they signed the list, correct? Yes, that is time consuming. Okay. Anybody have any suggestions on this? Okay, well, we'll keep moving forward, but that's one thing. Again, I thank all of you sponsors that operated. Okay, I wanted to do it digitally, but most kids did not have phones. Okay, that's your community. You have to know your community, what their communication abilities are. And this is part of this meeting today is to get best practices on what other sponsors did. And we are going out to other state agencies to get best practices on how they operated their programs, and it does vary depending on the size of your community. So if kids don't have phones, what's a better way to get them signed up and prevent duplication? We will keep going forward and see if we can come up with any ideas. Again, we will definitely have some tools and tricks and tips for next summer's operations and appreciate all the sponsors that operated this summer because you were not the guinea pigs, but you definitely took some of the hard lessons based on experience. So thank you. Again, the next two I'm going to go over briefly because we did not have any sponsors that operated home delivery. It is an option for sponsors that are approved to operate this to provide meals directly to homes of participants. You have to obtain written consent to the eligible children. You have to identify and invite households to participate. And if you are not a school food authority, you have to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the SFA if you want to get student data to identify eligibility. Again, that's the household home delivery has not been an option, but we did have, so just a quick side note on this. We had a sponsor that they provided multi-day meal distribution. And then when the staff left, if there were some extra meals, usually a couple extra meals, they brought them home to a family who they knew would not sign up for meals, would not participate, would not come down or send their children down. But they also knew that those children were in high need of these meals. So what the organization did was they came up with a plan on, they were going to continue to do this, but they were not claiming the meals. You know your community's best. This is something, obviously, we want you to get reimbursement for meals that you're serving, but this was a way that they were able to, it wasn't a large enough disallowance. They felt the need to feed these children that would not participate in the program was greater than the need to have reimbursement, and they did have funds to cover that. So that's just something that I noticed this summer at one of the sites, and I thought it was, I'm sure that there's lots of options to come up with solutions to how to get children to participate, but this was an option that the sponsor chose to take on themselves because they knew the need was there, but they did not have, they weren't going to get reimbursed for those meals. So home delivery, there is a way to do that and get reimbursed for the meals. The same with conditional non-congregate meal service. This one is interesting because it is a meal service where a site that qualifies for program participation because it conducts non-congregate meal service for eligible children, but the site is not located in an eligible area. And you know, in summer food, where the meals are served needs to be area eligible. So this is a way, another flexibility where sponsors can operate in a non-area eligible site, and serve the children that are eligible and receive reimbursement for those children. But they have to have eligibility data, which means enrollment records, and they have to make determinations on eligibility. And they also have to have an extra funding source because they have to feed all the children. They can only get reimbursed for children that are eligible for the meals, and then they need an extra funding source to cover the cost of the meals for children that aren't eligible. Again, I just wanted to show this on the screen because we did not have sponsors that operated this summer. And we do know, but one of the reasons I bring it up is we know that a lot of sponsors in Idaho are seeing that their sites are losing eligibility as the population in Idaho has increased so much during the past 4 years. It's our hope that instead of having this option as needed, the addition of Medicaid to the direct certification process will help increase the eligibility of sites and help sponsors be able to regain that eligibility for their sites. It's new in the program, so we hope that that is what is going to happen in the future. The direct certification system that with Medicaid expansion is something that is new, but it's starting to impact a lot of the districts around here in increasing their eligibility. So that's the hope that we see more to come on that in 2025 training because it is so new. Okay, ideal meal service operations. This is where I'd like to just open up the floor again and ask, what meal service type did the sponsors feel was most suitable to their operations? Was it daily non-congregate, multi-day, bulk, a combination? Is there anyone that wants to share what, for example, what they started with and what they ended with and what worked out for them?
I did a multi-day service. This is Angela again.
Okay,
But I did it on a daily non-congregate meal service, so it was more of a breakfast for the next day and lunch for that day. So the lunch was hot, but the breakfast was shelf stable. And the children picked it up because I didn't allow guardian pickup. I didn't want to get into that mess. And so I required all students or children to be present when they picked up a meal, so there was notification. And I got some pushback on the parents for that because I did shelf stable milk for breakfast. And so they were constantly getting the milk in the little containers. I didn't know if they liked it or not, but I'd rather be safe than have the parents take home stuff that would make them sick the next day.
absolutely. And we know that food safety aspect is on our shoulders. What they do with it once they leave the site, we don't have control over. So having that detailed instruction helps with making sure they have the information on what to do with the food products. But I did see several sponsors that they refrigerated that shelf stable milk. And apparently the chocolate shelf stable milk when it's cold is delicious. But that was something that they said helped decrease some of that pushback on shelf stable milk. And it really was, it seems to be becoming more accepted in the schools, and that's something I saw this summer. But that's, again, you have your program integrity, so providing shelf stable meals is a way to make sure you're not going to have food safety issues. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Angela. Okay, so this is my favorite part coming up. So we're going to just go over the sponsors and site participation for rural non-congregate in summer 2024. And we had 22 sponsors that were eligible and opted in to operate RNC this summer. Of those 22 sponsors, we had 76 sites that provided these combination of daily non-congregate, multi-day, and bulk meal distribution. This is where the impact is it's always been allowable to serve meals on the weekends in summer, but in my time at the state agency, I think in 2018, there was one sponsor that attempted to provide a Saturday meal distribution at a farmer's market. It did not go over well because it's a weekend. You want to ask your staff who is on summer break, not only to work during the summer, but to work during the weekend. So, and it just wasn't well received. So the option has always been there, but with the bulk and multi-day meal service, we saw a huge increase of meals that were sent home with families either on Monday during a bulk distribution or multi-day, or on Friday for weekend meals. And that has made a huge impact on the number of meals that were served. Okay. This is a small comparison of the meal service between 2023 and 2024. The information is current as of today, but there are still claims that have not been submitted for July and August. And this is the total meals served. We don't have, well, we're working on an update to My Idaho CMP that will allow us to separate out congregate and non-congregate meal service. But so we're compiling the non-congregate meals manually, but it is, and so the data is not complete. But look at the difference in breakfast meals served between 2023 and 2024. Over 100,000 more breakfast meals were served this summer. And I will share this because it came out in an email just a few days ago. Melissa Cook is our financial specialist, and she reports. She does the FNS reporting every month for our programs. And she got an email from FNS headquarters saying, hey, your breakfast meal service for July is 3 times higher than last year. Can you explain this, or is it an error? And she got back and said, no, this is what's happened. I think most of you sponsors know that traditionally lunch is the most common meal service for rural non-congregate or for summer programs. But with this distribution of providing lunch and then breakfast the next day, or breakfast and lunch together, look at the increase in breakfast meals served. That is amazing. And providing these meals in a multi-day or bulk, it's a lot of sponsors have staffing issues. But if you operate, let's say Monday, Tuesday, you have your staff, and then Tuesday, you're sending meals home for Tuesday through Sunday or Wednesday through Sunday. Your staff labor is cut down to 2 days, maybe a little more for preparation. You can pay them a higher wage, and they still get summer. They still get time off in the summer, which a lot of sponsors want. The kitchen staff, they want a break. So they have this kind of win-win separation situation where you're providing all the meals for the kids to make sure they're getting that nutrition, but you're cutting your labor hours down so nobody's completely burned out. So Katie said breakfast for next day. It's the best win-win scenario ever. You know, we have not seen breakfast meals this high, and this is still preliminary. This is not the end of summer. We still have 2 more months of claiming to go through. So I just am so excited because this is something that the integrity plan and the planning and organization, we cannot overstate how important it is to be prepared for these program operations. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of effort. It is a lot of planning. But what I saw when I went around the state is once the meals are served and the sponsors see the impact on their communities, they're receiving that positive impact. They're seeing their numbers, their reimbursement is going up through the roof, which enables them to expand their programs. Those tears of frustration from the start of the program of getting your plan in place and getting organized and getting your staff turn to tears of joy because they're really seeing the impact of their efforts. And you can see this, we've been trying to bridge the summer gap since the inception of this program. And this rural non-congregate is a way that you can make sure those children that are receiving meals during the school year are receiving those meals during the summer. So just wanted to highlight that. It's super exciting. And Katie Rogers, I just want to thank you. I'm going to hand the meeting over to you. And you can present on your experience this summer. I appreciate it. I have the slides if you just want to tell me when to go next. I have them in my presentation, or do you want to just take over and share your screen? What do you think?
I'll just go ahead with what you have because I don't have it pulled up. So it'll probably be
Perfect.
faster that way. And I will try to remember what I have coming next. But as you've been talking, I have a sticky note here of all the extra points that I wanted to talk about too. So
So,
if there's any questions or if you guys want to know something that I did or wanted to talk more about it, put it in the chat. And then once I get through the presentation, we can circle back and talk a little bit more. I have such a one-track mind that I'll get way off topic if we go through the chat during my slides. So let's get started. So in our operation for 2023, before we had the rural non-congregate, we did 3 summer school sites. So we have a secondary summer school site, our migrant summer school, and then kind of in August, there's a whole 6 kids for extended resource. So I count it because we did it, but it's not really much for us. And then we did 4 park locations, and this was my first year. That 2023 was my first year in Minidoka, so I just carried through what had been done in the past. And it's like 1 site per town that we have. So for Minidoka, we have 4 cities. 1 is ineligible; they're not area eligible. And then we have Heyburn, Rupert, and Paul. Rupert, we have 2 different parks because they're a little bit bigger. And then we have a picture here of our burger toppings. So even with summer operations, I want to give the kids kind of that salad bar, pick your options feel. So we put all the condiments that you could put on your burger in a bag, and then they can take what they want out of it. And then they don't have to take it at all, but it's just an option for them. So in 2024, we grew exponentially. We did our same summer school sites, but we added, I forget the count, 2, 5, 8, 7 park sites to our operation, which was huge. And I actually forgot to add 1 more on here. So in Heyburn, we did our usual park, but then I got on Google Maps and I looked for those little green areas of the parks in the city. So we nailed those across the board instead of centralizing it. And we lowered our time at the park so that we could make it to the next park because it's grab and go. You don't have to sit there and wait for the kids to eat. You just serve them their meal and that's it. So that's super nice. We were able to reach a lot more parks. And I was really curious to see the benefit of it for us. I haven't dove into our summer numbers, like what we're doing now. So this kind of gave me an opportunity to. And on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about it. We also added our bulk box. Oh, sorry. Go back. We also added our bulk boxes to our operation. We did 7-day boxes by doing a 5-day bulk meal, but then having 2 multi-day meals in combination. So we were able to get that 7 days. We had 4 sites. We had our central site here. And then we went as far west as we could go. We went as far north as we could go, and we went as far east as we could go. And we found those locations there. We worked with some of the businesses like it's called Renaissance Ranch now out north, but it used to be the old Idaho Youth Ranch. So I called them up. I said, hey, how do you guys feel about people coming over there to get these meals? They loved it. They welcomed us full-heartedly. And then we worked with Skyline Bar. It felt a little weird having people go to a bar, but it's a huge parking lot and it's the only thing out there. So it worked out very nice. And he was so welcoming for it. And then we have pictured here, we have one of our menus on the bottom there with the burrito that we had served at the sites. We also did breakfast for the next day as offer versus serve. So that's what we posted on Facebook. And then we have our menu sign of what we had at the park and then a picture of all of the things included. Okay, now next slide. There it is. Okay. You had me waiting. So like I said, we did our congregate sites, which are the standard. You show up to school, you eat at summer school. I really wanted to do these as grab and go because they cut our summer school down to 8 to 12. So it was interesting to get lunch in those kids because our bus driver said, absolutely not. We are not putting food on our bus. We're not doing bags. So we fed them a little bit earlier, and then they went to their last class and then went home. And then our parks, we did grab and go. So all of our meals were grab and go. We did breakfast for the next day. And like I said, I did that as offer versus serve. So you can see in the bottom left picture, we have this, I had it custom fabricated. It's a slide in and out kind of merchandising shelf so that we could really optimize our van here. So we had all of our 4 items in there for breakfast, and they got to pick 3. So they could have 2 milks if they wanted to. They could have a lot more fruit. We had, because included with lunch, we had fruit and vegetables, but then they could add a fruit. Maybe it was a fruit cup and we had fresh with lunch. It complemented what our lunch was. And maybe they just wanted a donut because who doesn't want a donut? But then we also used parent pickup. And I don't know. I have so mixed feelings with parent pickup. Operating the summer site, you know, we're not supposed to ask a lot of questions. We're there to feed the kids and everything. So I have a hard time with like rostering or like, is this really your kid? So if somebody came up and said, hey, I'm picking up for my kids, then that was really good enough for us. We made sure that they weren't like we made sure that they didn't abuse the program. But if they came and said, hey, can I pick up for the daycare? No, I'm sorry, you can't. And in fact, I had some Facebook messages of, hey, how can I get meals for my daycare? Or can I get a bulk box for my daycare? Well, sorry, that's not quite how it works. So then I said a little bit, we had our bulk boxes with 7 days. Those pickup sites were kind of spread out so that was the idea of it, was for if you can't make it to the parks, here, have a box. Or if you work and your kids are home alone, here's a box, here's their food. So we initiated a parent pickup for that. One thing that I'm planning on doing for next year that I think would really be beneficial is having that pickup time, one, be scheduled instead of being, hey, pick up between 11 and whatever time. That's how we had it. We had it pick up at this time, between this time at this location. Parents signed up for it. I plan on scheduling it more so there's different time slots that parents can come, because we had a lot of parents that, hey, I can't make it. Can I come in this time? So that was a challenge, but also you have to consider that these parents are getting a box because they're at work. So how can they pick up a box if they're at work? I'm gonna try my hardest to have a pickup that's kind of after hours, like maybe 5 or 6 p.m. or even a Saturday, like Dominique said, is a possibility. Uh, of course, labor comes into that. You know, how are you going to get people to staff it? But this year I was able to convince my district into paying. We created our summer cooks and site managers as a separate job rather than just carrying my current staff on from kitchen manager. We just paid them extra hours. My kitchen managers moved to site operators at the next stage up in the salary scale. So they were making not a ton more, but about 20 cents more. But then we had some cooks that wanted to kind of step into a manager spot. So that was my trial and error period, if you will, kind of a working job interview over the summer. And they would make $16 an hour during school. They made $20 an hour over summer. So that was huge for them. But if I'm paying them that way, I think that we would be able to get some people talked into working later hours or over the weekend. And yeah, our van here, we got a No Kid Hungry grant for some summer operations to really start up our rural non-congregate. That's what it was targeted for. So I purchased two vans to be correct. This brand new cargo van, which is fabulous. I love it. But then I wanted it to be snazzy, of course. So I got with Dairy West, and they actually worked with the graphic designer in making this so beautiful. And in another picture, I have another minivan to use for my use throughout the year, and I'll drive that around to all the sites, but it has the same little design just on the windows, so it's a little snazzy too. Okay.
And Katie, just before I move to the next slide, I want to thank you for showing this image of the pull-out bins on your van, because Offer versus Serve is allowed for school food authorities that are utilizing rural non-congregate. But how that looks is something that, how do I have children not touching everything, and how does that look? So this is a great representation of how you operated it, for sponsors to consider moving forward, and thank you.
Thanks. The poor guy that had to fabricate that. I just said, here's what I want. And he's like, okay, I think I can do it. But he has kids that participated. So his grandkids participated in our program. So he had a sense of ownership with it too. I just love the community outreach with it. Okay, so ballpark picture, here's the difference that RNC made for us. So you can see the numbers between summer of last year and summer of this year, but then an additional whole bulk box right there. So our sites, this is what I haven't looked at, and I found it so interesting. Our sites actually did not change from last year to this year. However, the additional sites that we had fed additional kids. That speaks volumes to me. These kids were, from these numbers, we're not getting meals beforehand. So reaching out and making these more neighborhood sites really helped in our area. So this is our average daily in the fancy colors here, but then our bulk boxes over to the right, this is our number of kids fed weekly. So if you take that times 7, that's going to be how many breakfast and then again lunch we served, because we did breakfast and lunch. So give me a click, please. So last year we made roughly $1,500 a week. And then no, a day, sorry, 1,500 a day. And then this year we made almost 3,000 per day. So that's almost double just on running our grab and go sites. Click. And then our bulk boxes made us 14,000 every week. And that's just it. There was so minimal cost to it. I can't even explain how beneficial it was for us. I only had staff, I had like three to 5 depending. They came in on Friday at around 6 to noon. They prepped a whole bunch of stuff, and then Monday they came in 6 until about 1 to get rid of our boxes. And that was all the labor that we had into it. That was really it. We didn't have hardly any costs other than food cost. So that was, I'm not going to say all profit, but mostly profit. They're not like the the parks. One more click there. So altogether, our park sites times 5. So we were making almost 15,000 a week, but then add in our bulk boxes. So we were making almost 30,000 a week. Here's a click. That's 192% increase. So not only I made the comment, it's a win-win-win scenario, but honestly, I don't know when the win stops. So this is feeding more kids. It's bringing us more funds that we can turn around and invest into our program. But not only is it that, it's bringing more money into our state, because their budget is built by how many meals we serve too. So it's win-win-win across the board. The only downfall I will say that RNC had was the application packet, because we went from having 4 parks in summer to having, I don't remember, let's see, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11 parks. But then we also had to times that by 2 because we had breakfast and lunch. So just a little forewarning, and this might change for next year, given that we've been 1 year under operation. Plan a little bit of extra time for your packet. Okay, next slide. So our bulk boxes, we had a Google form for parents to sign up. This is the only way that we had parents sign up for the boxes. I included the QR code if you wanted to go and look at the actual Google form. I opened it back up because it's not anywhere. So if you wanted to take a look at what our site was, or our sign up was. Go ahead and take a look. But the majority of it was select your location, tell us how many kids are in your household, let us know any allergies. But then we had them kind of acknowledge the big one, if you're getting this box, you cannot get summer sites. And we had some families that signed up for multiple or different weeks, like hit or miss, because there were some weeks that they wanted to go to the park and some weeks that they wanted a box. So that was something that we went back and added, was the selection of deliveries. So originally I was thinking, okay, if they sign up, then they're going to be good for the year. Well, then we had families that were like, well, I don't want a box this week. So then we went and added all of the delivery week pickups. We delivered on Monday, so we added all of those Mondays, and then they could check which ones they wanted. That was super beneficial for us. We also added something, a phone number. We added a phone number. I didn't have that originally. I don't know what I was thinking, but we needed a phone number. So if we prepped this box for them and they didn't come, we needed to get a hold of them and say, hey, we have a box for you. Are you going to come and get it? And then if they didn't, we took them off the list for the next week. So that was kind of their punishment, but also we're not wasting labor on that. Because we did have a substantial amount of boxes that didn't get picked up. So, but because it's minimally processed, it's sitting in the freezer, it's sitting in the cooler, we were able to reuse it for the next week. We had, like I said, minimal staff hours included in this, but we had the maximum amount of kids fed. We were feeding so many kids from this, and Angela, I think we might have been feeding some kids from across the river. But again, integrity plan, how do you monitor that? So anyways, this is a picture of our boxes being prepped. That's one of the big considerations. If you're going to do bulk boxes, where are you going to produce it at? We planned on doing the warehouse because all of our food's at the warehouse. So if we were at maximum capacity at our warehouse here. So if we were to move to another location, then we would have to deliver all of the food there, which didn't make sense to us. So we just made it work. Next year, I think if we had more spread out days, that we would be able to accommodate a little bit better. And then Dominique had a picture of kind of my menu, like the what's in the box. You can see it on top of the boxes here. So that's how I kind of communicated to the parents what's in the box, because sometimes it's just a corn dog in a Ziploc bag, but actually it's a breakfast on a stick in the bag. So no surprises there. We included the point of sales so that parents or kids or whoever knew how to actually cook the item, because not everything is the same. Yes, it can go in the microwave, but it would be better if it followed the directions. So we included that. And then we also included a little food safety blurb at the top that had, don't leave your frozen stuff out, put it in the cooler, temp it to whatever temperature, the basics that we all know, but we communicated that to families. Okay, next slide. So how did it work? We had a few families we found in our monitoring process that we knew we're a small community, we know names, we know faces. We went out to one of our parks and there's a family there getting meals, and we're like, hey, don't you get bulk meals? Oh yeah, I do, blah, blah, blah. And so we shut that down quick, fast, and in a hurry. And then we had some with migrant summer school. So we had our park site at Paul Housing, which is a very Hispanic, low income housing operation that typically most of the kids go to migrant summer school. So those families were not able to get a meal if their kid was at summer school. And then likewise with the boxes, if they're in summer school, they can't sign up for the boxes. And we had some families that communicate, it's hard for us to monitor that, but we took it on face value. So if they said, hey, my kid's in summer school, okay, well then you can't sign up. And we had some families do that where they selected the weeks after summer school ended. Or like in the case that Dominique shared, if they have one kid in summer school, but they have 3 at home, we had one family that we served her 3 meals. And then after summer school stopped, we had 5 meals for her. So it's the sign up locations. You live and you learn some. We had one of the Far West site that we had. I was trying to get it at Kasota, but it's actually privately owned, and I did get permission, but it was kind of like, I mean, if you have to, permission. So I went a little bit more towards town, and there's a pull-off pop-up way station there. It's a really great site to use, but the way that I labeled it was it has a historical site there that says Camp Rupert. Well, one, if you're not paying attention, or two, if English is not your first language and you see Camp Rupert, one would maybe think that it is a location in Rupert, but it's not. So we had several families sign up for that Camp Rupert location and then show up at the warehouse expecting a box. So I'll probably change that, either change the location or change the name. And then there is a side note, there was one, the city of Heyburn actually called me and said, hey, I think you guys should try this park too. It's right next to a trailer house or a trailer park. And I think it would be a really good spot to serve at. And they thought that our Riverside Park wasn't going to get a ton, but we actually did about 40 meals there. So next year I'll be adding that additional park in Heyburn, so that it's going to make 5 parks for them, but it's all for the good or the better cause. So one thing to consider for that I'm going to consider for next year is one, adding a share table for our boxes. So there's a picture of the gallons of milks that we were doing. We complemented the gallons of milk with the shelf stable milk. So we did the math on the gallon of milk, and then anything additional, they got shelf stable milk. We started with the boxes of shelf stable milk, or the cases, and we had families getting huge amount of cases. But then it became hard to get for us. We were not able to get the pallets that we were ordering. So we moved to gallons, and it was great. But we had some families that, one, they don't have room for 5 gallons of milk at one time, or that their kids just don't like 1% milk, which I'm in that boat. I would not drink 1% milk. So having a share table just right outside the door, or a share cooler, if you will, I think is going to be an addition for us. And then if people only get 1 gallon, but they want 2, they can take 2. The other thing is the flow of traffic. So if you're considering doing bulk boxes, or even the what do you call it? Grab and go meals where we were on a route, I would really encourage you to do a dry run of it, and check the flow of traffic. So for this coming year, we're gonna have kids or families circle around in our warehouse and not get out of their car. We're gonna take the meals to them. This year, how we did it was they just came through our door and we brought it to them, and it was a mess because we have one little door. We needed about a garage door so that we could flow traffic and everything, but it's something to start from the beginning and not in the middle of it. And I kind of talked about our different locations there. And then our park sites. So our pickup times, not necessarily the time that we're at the park, but like I said, do a dry run of your operation, including the food going to the parks. So that little van that was in the picture, that guy can hold a capacity of about 150 meals, breakfast and lunch. So anything past that, they really couldn't do. So that was difficult, but we could combat that with doing different pickup times and have them come back to the kitchen and reload and then go do another. And then instead of doing breakfast, I think next year I'm going to do snack, only because of the amount of meals we were doing multiplied by the amount of food that was going out. So if we had our Rupert sites, their route was Neptune and Lincoln Park. Those 2 sites combined were almost 300 meals. So if you have 600 milk on the bus, that's a lot. So to move from breakfast to snack, it might not bring us the most revenue, but it's going to be the most logistically friendly. So also another thing too is to mark your sites where you're going to have the pickup. So we have a sign here that was brought to me by the state agency, and that was where our Camp Rupert site was, so that families knew, hey, this is where you're picking up. There's also, you could do flags or anything, but I don't know if where you live, we have 70-mile-an-hour winds every other day during the summer. So this yard sign was placed and then never to be found again. It's probably clear out in the desert by now. But next slide, please. And it's all worth it in the end. It is hard work. Being the park deliveries are probably the hardest thing ever. There's way more work than school because you got to lift up, put it on the truck, bring it to the park, lift it up, put it on the park bench, serve it, all the things. And we're cooking more than we typically would during school. But we had Spider-Man come and eat lunch. This was actually one of my staff members' sons. And apparently he had this costume and she's like, hey, do you want him to do this? I said, heck yeah, he's coming to the park. So we had him at a couple parks. My favorite is this, the middle picture here. She brought her Spider-Man to go see Spider-Man. I love it. But I encourage you guys to have some sort of event that draws people in or makes it memorable. And here's just a few more tips for you guys. Survey your community. That's how I started this whole operation. I did a Google survey that I sent out on every single platform I could think of to see if rural non-congregate was even needed in the area, and it came back absolutely overwhelming, a need. Families really missed it from COVID, and they wanted it here to stay. So we brought it to them here to stay. No Kid Hungry has some really good resources. If you just Google No Kid Hungry, rural non-congregate, or No Kid Hungry, best practices, you'll find all their resources. And then always consult your kitchen in the process. What you think might work behind the desk might not always work. For example, oh, here's my minivan with the window there. I had all 4 Rupert sites in that minivan, all scheduled out. And she calls me, she's the first week, she's like, Katie, I cannot do this. This is not going to work. We can't do it. What are we going to do? So we actually split the 4 Rupert sites into 2 and 2. And then that worked. So always talk with your kitchen first. They're the people on the ground. Make sure it's going to work. And make the menu work for you. With our bulk boxes, we did whole produce. I didn't want to spend time cutting melon or cutting cucumbers or whatever it was. So we worked our menu to accommodate the produce, but then, you know, we're making quite a bit of money with this. So we were able to give them a little extra if it came to it. And then look at your case pack items. So Pop-Tarts, for example, if you have a family of 6, hey, they come in a box of 6. Don't even worry about unpackaging it. Boom, there it is. And then gallons of milk. But disclaimer, double, triple check your math when you're doing your gallons of milk for the ounces. So for me, we do 8 ounces of milk with each meal. So that's 16 ounces times 7 days. So that's X amount of ounces divided by gallons and then times by kids. So that's a lot of multiplication. I encourage you to use a Google spreadsheet or some sort of spreadsheet and not just a 10 key. That way you know your formula works. But really the possibilities are endless. Honestly, whatever you can dream up for your summer operation, 9 times out of 10 it's possible. You just need to collaborate a little bit with some friends. The state agency, make sure it's going to work in your kitchens, make sure that it's going to work for your community, and go for it. Yeah. So here we have some of the ladies serving here. My intentions were to serve out of the van, and that's why we got that sliding rail. But for the park site, the 2 Rupert Park sites where we're serving over 100 kids, it just was not feasible. So they bring it out onto one of the park benches. It seems like 60 meals was kind of the tipping point of, can you serve in the van or do you need to bring it out? And then next slide. That might be my last slide. I'm not sure.
That is your last slide, Katie.
Well, I saw a couple chats. So first, were there any other questions or how did you do this? It looks like Angela had a comment just about what is our what is our responsibility to determine, parents jumping the counties, going from one to the other where we're so close. Like Hayburn is almost right next, like it is next to Burley. So they could go from one site to the next. But how do we determine that?
And just, Katie, I saw that the chat from Angela, and that's one of the things, it is. You're responsible for your integrity plan. You cannot possibly determine the site hoppers that may exist and will do what they want to do, regardless of what your plans in place are. So one thing with communities such as yours and Angela's so close, communicating with each other on what your plan is, where you plan to operate, that and serving times, that can help. But for example, I had a call from a parent that lived in Angela's area, but wasn't able to pick up the daily non-congregate meals. So we provided your information, Katie, so they could go get set up with you and pick up the bulk meals on Mondays, because that worked for that family where she couldn't get her kids or herself to the park. So it's really that having that communication with your neighboring sponsors and saying, okay, what's your plan? How are you operating? What are the times? Having same meal service times. But honestly, there's no way to 100% guarantee you're going to avoid this. If where there's a will, there's a way. You can only do your best and try and come up with your plan, enforce your plan, and have that communication with parents, other sponsors, and your community.
So I will say one of my dream ideas for next year, because I always have something. I want to do like we have a big hotspot of all the fast food drive-throughs over, it's kind of Burley, but it's still my county, over by McDonald's and Wendy's and everything. So I want to do my own fast food drive-through, but with all these free meals for the kids. So parents get in line and drive through and get a free meal for their kid. They just have to be in the car and away we go. So I got some thinking to do on it, but that's my dream for next year.
A great idea. And that's something when you go through this summer and you see what you've learned, how can you make it easier, smoother? How can you reach more participants? One thing I did want to touch on, Vanessa had a comment about this, the multi-day and rural non-congregate, is that they had so much appreciation from families this
Yes.
summer, and they love the multi-day pickup and the flexibilities offered. For sponsors that have been on the program for a long time, that has not necessarily been the case always. Some people have experienced pushback about these feeding programs, and I think with this rural non-congregate, it is so beneficial to community members and their kids because they have food. They don't have to worry about paying a bill or buying food. They have food, it's accessible. Their kids, they know their kids they're meeting nutrition standards, so they're not just eating all the chips in the kitchen for lunch that day. But I've seen from the state agency, the support from the community has been overwhelming, and that's what we're looking for, because they know they're getting nutritious meals and they don't have to worry about paying for it, because it is a program that helps everybody. As Katie said, it helps your state, because that money is staying in state, and it helps the kids, and it helps bridge that gap, which is something that summer food operators have struggled for years because of the congregate feeding requirement, is having the number of meals that you've served increase so exponentially, which means you're meeting more children's needs. And that's why we're here. There's a lot of paperwork involved, but that's the end goal, is to make sure this happens.
One of the big comments that I heard from several families was that they didn't want to participate because they didn't want to take a free meal from a kid who needs it. So just trying to communicate that to families of, hey, help me, help you, help us. I think they think that we have a set amount of meals that we can serve. And they don't want to take that away from others, but that's not the case. We're here to provide meals, and you getting a meal is going to help us because now we get that reimbursement. We're able to pay our staff. So it's really a help you, help me situation. But communicating that can be a little challenging sometimes.
And I will put in when we post this, I was at a site and they had, their marketing was amazing. And one of their marketing tips was saying, please know that you are not taking a meal away from another child if you are receiving this meal, because it's something, I think Katie, you and I were in Baltimore when they brought that up at the No Kid Hungry Summit, and I hadn't thought of that, but it was a situation that other states encountered with, they didn't feel like they were in need enough, but promoting the benefits and how how the program helps everybody is a good way to market that and make sure people are receiving those benefits that can without thinking that they're denying somebody else the benefits. One other really good marketing tip I saw this summer was we were out at a site and they were providing meals for the weekend. So the parents would come up and they would say, do you want to bring home meals for the weekend? And some of the parents asked, how much? Yes, how much? And the response was so great and general. They said, there's no cost. We have been able to expand our program operations. And that was it. There was nothing else said, but just that we were able to expand operations. And the look on the parents' faces as they're receiving these meals for their children for the weekend that's why we're in this. We want to feed kids, and this is a really good way to make sure it happens. So, okay.
So, I found out that the rural area in Burley at the very, very end before summer started, so I just started the one site. But I really like that bulk idea. I was wondering, can we do a bulk site out of a cafeteria kitchen? Because we found that we were taking 600 meals to the park. And if we did the park as a bulk meal instead of going to the park, can my ladies deliver it outside the back door, like Katie said about having a drive-through as long as the kids are in the van? Would that be countable, or is that have to go into a congregated meal site because it's out the back door of the cafeteria?
No, that's a great question, Angela. It's how you set up that site. So if you're having summer school, so for example, we had a site that was summer school, say from 11 to 12, and they fed lunch congregate to those kids. But then at 12:30, they opened up the cafeteria and the parents lined up with their kids and came in through the cafeteria and picked up meals for the rest of the week and the weekend. So it's how you set up your site. And cafeterias are probably better suited for bulk distribution, but it is how you plan your site to operate. You are able to operate bulk meals out of a cafeteria.
Because that would make it it would make it beneficial because like Katie said, you have a van that carries about 150 meals at a time. So, and we had to make sure that we got our breakfast and lunch to the park for 600 kids a day. So if we could move that as a drive-through, like Katie was saying, that she wants to do next year, instead of transporting all those meals as a daily site into a bulk site or even a daily drive-through site, that would be a lot more beneficial than having my ladies pack it into the van and drive it over and do a couple trips to the park with 600 meals.
Absolutely. And again, this was the first year. This was essentially trial and error. What worked, what didn't work, what can you think about improving moving forward for sponsors that haven't operated rural non-congregate before? What are some things that you might consider? So really, this is year one. It will get easier. It will get more efficient, and the reach will continue to expand. So that's really just, no one can do it all right the first year because you don't know how it's going to work until you actually jump in and do it.
If this year had a theme, it was trial and error.
Absolutely. And and just, for example, from the beginning of your operations, what you had planned, this is our integrity plan, this is what we're going to do, to meal services in when you realize this isn't working at all. And so really turning on the fly and making adjustments. So for the end of your operations, how that differs from the beginning, that's what this summer was about. And it will change, it will happen, but that's why we started slowly and we can move forward with our experiences. And Katie, thank you so much for sharing, because this has been super helpful on what you encountered, what obstacles you faced and how you were able to overcome them, and moving forward, what your plans are for next year. So thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thanks for having me. And I think everybody here, I think, has my email, but if not, feel free to reach out and email me if you have any other questions. My email is just krogers@minnedokaschools.org.
Great. And are there any other questions or comments that people would like to share? We had a lot of time slated for this. Again, until we do it, we don't know how much time it's going to take. But are there any questions, comments, or concerns that you'd like to bring up about the meeting today before we let you get an hour and a half back of your fabulous Friday?
I would note that if you're gonna do the non-congregated feeding, that you order your product in advance. I tried ordering the shelf-stable milk, and it put me on a, what's the word? You're gonna get it soon kind of thing, and so when summer was over, I got 4 pallets of shelf-stable milk after the fact. So if you're gonna go into doing the summer program using the shelf-stable milk, I recommend ordering that in advance before you get to the summer, or else you'll be left without it, and you actually have to pay more going to a different company getting the shelf-stable milk.
That's great advice, Angela. I think, Katie, we talked about one other part of this, having space for all your food, especially your milk, is we talked about having plans or giving families ideas on what to do with their milk. I mean, if they're bringing home 3 gallons of milk and they don't have space, or they don't think they can drink it all, how to utilize it in cooking or freeze it for other use, or things, just options to help parents figure out what to do with all this food that they're getting. Moving forward, that's just something to consider as you plan your operations. Okay, well, hearing nothing from anyone else, thank you very much for your time today. And as you start making your plans for next summer, be sure to reach out to the state agency with any questions. And again, Katie has offered to share her experience and networking amongst one another. That's a really good way. You learn best from one another on things that work for you and your communities. Key takeaways: communication with your communities, letting them know what is going to happen, what the interest is, planning, and then being able to adjust your plans as you go through this experience. But again, thank you so much for being on the call. I hope that it has been helpful for you as you move forward with getting ready for summer 2025, after obviously the school year. And if there's nothing else, I will give you back an hour and a half of your day and wish you all a great weekend. We will have both yesterday's and today's meetings posted in my Idaho CMP. I will send out a broadcast email as soon as those are available, because both days had different presenters and different information to share out to help you move forward. Okay, thanks everyone.
Make sure you stop recording.
Thank you. I think I did. I stopped.